I found it in a vaulted Gothic church basement that was like the set of a movie, where there were shelves taller than me that overflowed with boxes holding every scrap of anything that this church had saved for a century. There were receipts from the 1950s and meeting minutes from the 60s. There were attendance tallies from the 40s and commemorative plates from the 70s. There were used furniture, and there were spare fuses to things that no longer existed. In one of these boxes, I found it, a pamphlet, this little pamphlet, 3x6, folded in half, printed in deep, crisp red on white paper, the sort of clear, direct design that you get out of a brochure printed in 1943. Printed then by the American Unitarian Association, the predecessor to our current denomination. It was titled, "What I Expect of My Church," which 80 years ago, and maybe still now, is the inversion of the message of many denominations. "What I expect of my church, a laywoman speaks," which 80 years ago, and maybe still today, is the opposite of who gets to do the talking in a lot of churches. Virginia Frederick McGill, it's wonderfully old Unitarian sort of name, New Englandy sort of name. Virginia Frederick McGill writes this in old-fashioned language that all these years later still points to what so many of us want out of our church. She says, "I want to belong to a church which is not content to be a coaster or a glider or a stand-putter," which is not a word I have heard in any other context, but I get it. She says, "I want my church to be one in which I can feel complete pride, one for which I shall not have to apologize in any way. And so I want my church to work on and on until its organization, its policies, its program, so that it's a living example of the dynamic, democratic faith it preaches. I want my church to be a force in the community. Therefore, I want it to make a study of the community needs and then build its program, setting as its goals leadership where new service is vital, and active cooperation with agencies doing work of which it approves, and open opposition to forces of evil and selfishness. I want my church to teach in the church and in the Sunday school and to emphasize throughout its programs the following benefits and attitudes." And I love this wonderfully. This is not the language that we still use to say these things, I don't think. But I love the directness. She says, "I wanted to teach the self-development in skill and character. That self-development is our obligation to the world throughout our life. And that in unselfish, intelligent leadership and cooperation are the highest goals." She says, "I wanted to teach that the truth is not static, and that, therefore, beliefs and attitudes should be remodeled as new light comes. I wanted to teach that the most important task and duty with which this faith challenges its members is that of working out their own individual philosophies of life. That a religion serves a person truly only when we work out continually our own personal ideas and ideals until they produce at all stages of life a philosophy compelling enough to make continual development and service essential to our happiness." She says at last, knowingly, "Perhaps you will say, I want a tremendous lot from my church." I do. I want my church to pull me a little, to push me when I lag behind occasionally, when the obstacles are too great, but most of the time, I want it to teach me to climb all by myself and even be able to do a little pulling. And with the beauty of its service, the vitality of its teaching, and the inspiration of its example to keep me dreaming dreams I never can forget, and show me stars I never saw before. From time to time, people come to me and say things like, I'm the only one of my friends who goes to church, and I don't know how to explain to them that it's not weird. I have trouble explaining, I go to church, but not like that. I go to church, but a church that says everyone counts and everyone matters and actually means it. A community which does not require that in order to be worthy, I have to believe things that seem clearly impossible or wrong to my lived experience. I'm part of, I co-create a community that I don't have to explain away how it conflicts with my values, where I don't have to mask or hide some essential part of who I really am or what I am about. I'm part of a tradition that doesn't give me all the answers, but helps me ask better questions and stay grounded in those values I believe most fiercely, which are also the easiest to forget. Part of a tradition that cares about the world and what it can become and says our work is to bend the arc of history toward justice. These are difficult things to say to your friend over a cup of coffee, explaining how church works. This tradition doesn't ask us to believe in things we can't, but to believe in the things we can, in hope, in growth, in connection and community, in an unseen and interdependent web of life. And whatever winding road has brought you to this moment, and wherever the road ahead leads, here we are together.